I want to introduce my friend Phil Berman. He's a producer with CBS News in LA, and he's been doing this stuff for 19 years. Phil's produced for news stations in Miami, Tampa, Sarasota, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he produced, reported, and anchored in Greenville, Mississippi. Phil is honored to be taking part in his 8th STN convention. So, Phil, take it away.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, everyone, my name is Phil Berman. 24 years ago, I guess, I was sitting where you guys are. Now I'm a producer for CBS News in Los Angeles, like Jackie said. So the session, I'm basically just going to tell you how I got from where you are to where I am now. To start off with, what does a producer do? So a producer basically selects the stories you see in a newscast, decides what order they're going to go in, decides what the teases are going to say to keep you sticking around, writes the stories, decides the graphics. Is there going to be like an over-the-shoulder graphic over here, which anchor is going to read it, where the anchor is going to read it from, how much time weather gets, times the entire show from beginning to end, keeps the show on time, talks to reporters throughout the day, talks to the assignment desk, basically puts the show together. They're in charge of the show. But I didn't always want to be a producer. So I went to high school in Fort Lauderdale. I did the morning announcements, like I'm sure much of you guys do. And I decided I was going to anchor the Today Show. That is what I was going to do out of college. And that's really what I wanted to do. But there was a lot I was going to have to do to get there. First, I decided that I was going to stay in state for college. So that was Florida. So I decided to attend University of South Florida, which is in Tampa, for mass communications, because it's a great school for mass comm. And also Tampa's a great TV market there. I could get a great internship. And so that's a good tip that I have for you guys, is always look for internships. And my third year in the school, I was an intern for NBC News Channel 8. So I learned so much there. They basically let you do everything because you're free labor for them. They don't have to pay you. You're not paying them, obviously. You're getting college credit or something of the like for it. And you can learn. You can sit up at the assignment desk and see how the desk workers work throughout the day. You can sit with the cameraman on the studio floor. You can go out with reporters. You can go out with photographers. You can sit with the anchors all day. I did everything. I helped with everything. I got coffee. I ran scripts. I held microphones. I did everything. And while in college, one of my professors became my mentor, basically guided me through the whole application process, because your first job is the most important job you'll apply for in TV news, because you want to get your foot in the door. So she told me, she said, apply for jobs 2 months before graduation. So I was graduating in May, so I started in March. So spring break, this is back in 2002, I spent the entire week on my dorm room floor dubbing VHS tapes. And if you guys don't know what VHS tapes are, because this is like old school for you guys, they're these big clunky tapes that you would basically put into a VCR machine, and there you would have your video and audio. So I basically had to hook 2 VCRs together, and I spent a week on the floor just pressing play, record, and making copies of these tapes and sending them out in the mail with my resume. I think now it's probably email and a YouTube link, but then we had a lot, bigger fish to fry. We had to take these bulky tapes and packages to the post office. I applied for jobs on the website called tvjobs.com. If you guys are seniors in high school and don't have a subscription, you should definitely get a subscription. It's not expensive, to tvjobs.com. All the TV stations and media organizations from around the country put all of their jobs right there. And you can search by job title, you can search by years experience, you can search by, city, whatever you want to do. My mentor told me, she said, apply for anchor first and see what happens. So I applied for anchor jobs. I got nothing. I applied for anchor reporter jobs. I got nothing. I applied for reporter jobs. I got nothing. And she said, why don't you apply for producer reporter jobs? And I knew nothing about producing. I mean, we did a news show every day at in our college, and it was, I knew the kind of basics of it, but I didn't really know in depth what it is. And she said, just apply for it. If you get anything, or when you get something, they'll teach you there. It's a small market. You're going to learn easy. So she said, take the first yes, that you get. And, if they want you to sweep floors and be the best floor sweeper that they ever had. So I applied for producer reporter jobs, and graduation day of 2002, I walked across the stage. I went to lunch with my family. I got back to my dorm room. I logged onto my email, and I had a job offer from a city in Greenville called Greenville, Mississippi, market 182. I don't know if you guys know about markets because I can't see you raise your hands, but I actually wrote down markets. New York is number 1, LA is number 2, and Chicago is number 3. Philly is number 4. Dallas, San Francisco, Atlanta, Houston, DC, and Boston are your top 10 markets. So obviously the top 10 cities in the world or in the country with population, that's how they do markets. So if you can tell New York is number 1 and Greenville, Mississippi was 182, you could tell there weren't a lot of people in that city. So I moved to Greenville, that I didn't know where this was, in the middle of the country. I signed a 2-year contract. I learned producing on day 1. Greenville was a training market, which means you got in, you just worked through your contract, and you left to a bigger market. So that's why you want to start off small, because you can make mistakes, not like you can make mistakes now. Like I can't make these mistakes in market 2 that I was making in market 182. You're just training. You're just learning, how to do TV basically. It's stuff you can't do when you get to a higher market. So my job would be producing 3 days a week and reporting 2 days a week, because remember, I was a producer reporter. So another girl was hired to do the opposite. She would produce 2 days a week and report 3 days a week. So a couple months into this, I actually decided that I liked producing better. Why? Because as much as I thought I would love being on camera, I hated it. I would go to the store in like sweats and a t-shirt to pick up stuff for dinner, and someone would see me in the aisle and just start like yelling at me for a tie I wore. Oh, that tie didn't match that suit last night, and I didn't like that store you did. And I was like, oh my god, like I felt like I had no privacy, and I was like, this is not for me. And plus I like the idea of putting the entire show together and not just having a little 2-minute chunk of it. So it turns out that the other girl who was hired also to be a producer reporter liked reporting better. So they basically just switched us. So I became a full-time producer. She became a full-time reporter. Also, they didn't replace someone when they were sick. So basically, when you're at a market like Market 2, which is Los Angeles, if someone calls out sick, they just call in a replacement. In a city like Greenville, there aren't that many people there working at the station. So if someone calls out sick, you're the one who kind of has to fill in, which was fantastic because I learned how to run cameras, run scripts, run the tapes. I learned how to direct. I learned how to do audio. I learned how to do master control. I learned it all, which is fantastic because if you start off in a higher market, you're not going to get that flexibility and ability to learn other jobs. So about 1.5 years into my contract, my main anchor wanted to go home to Florida, which is where she was from, really badly. So she actually got an interview at the station in Sarasota, which is south of Tampa. So it's like my old stomping grounds. I knew exactly where this was. When she was on her interview, she mentioned that she had a great producer, me, and she would love to bring him along. And so she gave the news director my phone number and my information. My anchor did not get the job. But the next day, the news director who was in charge of the newsroom, the whole news operation, that's your boss, she called me and offered me a job sight unseen. Apparently, my anchor really talked me up super, super well. And one thing led to another, and a few months later, I was in Sarasota. I was hired as the 6 and 11 o'clock producer. At night, I loved it. I was 3 hours from home. It's on the water. There's great people there. But about 1.5 years later, I started to get antsy. And when I start to get antsy, at a job, I'm like, okay, it's time to look for something else. I had no pets, no kids, no significant other. So I just started applying all over the place, all over the country to random cities because, why not? I did this obviously on the DL. I didn't want anyone to find out. I got calls from a few stations, but I decided to talk to a station in Tulsa for a whole bunch of different reasons. But we agreed that I would fly out there for an interview. So they flew me out. They loved me. I loved them. I loved the city. It was in the middle of Oklahoma. It's clean. It's green. The people are incredible. So I got the job. I moved to the middle of Oklahoma to be the 10 o'clock producer for the NBC station in Tulsa. I loved the city. The station was fantastic. Um, I made friends that became and still are family there. I still have a condo there. I ended up buying a condo and I'm renting it out, so I still have a link there. I signed a 3-year contract in Tulsa with the intent on being gone after 2 years because I was like, I don't know how I can stay here longer than 2 years. I ended up staying for 5 years just because I fell in love with it. I fell in love with everything about that city and everyone there. Um, why did I leave? Because one day I got a call from an executive producer in Dallas, which is 4 hours from Tulsa, who wanted to know if I was interested in being a morning producer. And I said, how did you get my resume? And he said, oh, it was out there, one of our headhunters, sent it to us. I knew this headhunter named JJ, and I'm still good friends with her. And she had asked for my resume. This is months and months earlier than this, just to kind of freshen it up and just keep me in her files. So apparently it got out, and that's how they got my resume. I said that basically my entire career was night shows, the 5 p.m., the 6 p.m., the 11 p.m., the 10 p.m. And they wanted me as a morning producer, and I just politely declined. And I said, I'm sorry, that's not my forte, but keep my resume on file. And if anything comes up in the future, let me know. What happened was he ended up passing my resume onto his former executive producer at the station in Miami that he just came from. They were trying to find his replacement. So he said, this guy may be good for you. The next day I got a call from that woman in Miami asking if I was interested. And I said, okay, my friends are there, my family's there. Like, this is home for me. I'm like, of course I am. This is a station, a CBS station that I watched growing up. Yes, I'm interested in going there. I ended up having 2 Skype interviews with them. One of my greatest stories I tell people is whenever you have a Skype interview, they can't see what you're doing. So I put all different cue cards around my laptop. And these cue cards were any question they could have asked me. Because when you're going to go on one of these interviews, it's like they're going to ask you, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What's your news philosophy? They're all the same questions that they want to know. So I literally would have all the questions and the answers that they would ask. So anything they asked me, I would just look and be like, oh, yes, here are my strengths. Oh, yes, here's this. And they loved it. They absolutely loved me. They decided the next step was to fly me in. So they flew me in one day. I remember waking up at 6 a.m. in Tulsa, took a flight to Miami. I landed in Miami at 1:30 in the afternoon. I went to lunch with them, went to the station, did a whole bunch of interviews in person with people there. I got on a plane at 5:30, landed in Tulsa, and went to bed in Tulsa. So I was literally in Miami for 4 hours. They were serious. The next day they called me and offered me the job. I was there a month later. I was in Miami for 2 years. 2.5 years. I produced the 11 p.m. news there. I mean, again, I was home. Everyone that I knew was there. I never thought I was going to leave Miami. But I ended up doing that, and I'll tell you how I did that. A few months in, I noticed that the entertainment reporter in Miami was working solo. And I went up to her and I said, do you have a producer? And she said, no. And I said, can I produce for you, like in my own time? And she goes, I would love that. And so she let me come with her to red carpet events with celebrities all over the place, press junkets. And if you guys don't know what a press junket is, it's basically when a new TV show or a new movie comes out and they have all the stars from that movie or TV show. And these are like A-list, huge stars in a hotel room. And each news organization is allowed, a crew. And then you go into the hotel room and you talk to that A-list star for 5 minutes, and then you go to the next one, and you just go to the next one. And this is all day that they do this. And so I would go with her to these junkets, and I just studied her, and I saw what she asked and how she asked it, and how she interacted with these huge stars. And one day I was at this, they were always at fancy hotels in Miami. So I was at this fancy hotel, and I got a call from her, and she said, hey, Phil, she goes, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm not going to make it. She goes, can you do this without me? And I said, of course I can. So from that day on, I did all the press junkets because she trusted me to do that. So when you're in TV and you're doing your job, always look for other opportunities where you are, because a lot of times they won't come to you. You need to go to them and just look for things and be observant. And so that was a great story that I tell people, because that's just something that I kind of asked. I said, hey, can I, help you with this? And she said, sure. And all of a sudden I was literally producing entertainment news for her. 2 years in, this is how I ended up leaving Miami. Whitney Houston passed away. And Whitney Houston, if you guys don't know who she is, she's a huge, huge music icon who passed away back in 2010. I'm sorry, 2012. And for some reason, I just became obsessed with the story. Like anything that I could put in my newscast, you know, from Whitney's background or how Whitney died or Whitney's hotel room that she passed away in, or interviews with her mom, exclusives with her daughter or her husband. I wanted to run anything. Someone at our station put me in touch with a gentleman who works at Entertainment Tonight. He was the director of affiliate relations. He's still there, but a higher job now. And she put me in touch with him, and I talked to him, and he said, listen, every night on Entertainment Tonight, we have exclusives with all different people of Whitney's, you know, background and life. And if you will run little snippets of these interviews in your newscast and tease ahead to Entertainment Tonight the next night, we would be forever grateful. And I was like, sure, of course I will. So he sent me all this exclusive content. It helped my show. It helped Entertainment Tonight. And when this was all done a few weeks later, he emailed me and he said, hey, Phil, the next time you're in Los Angeles, let me know and I'll give you the grand tour of Entertainment Tonight. And I'm like, oh my God, entertainment? I'm like, I love Entertainment Tonight. Yes, I want a tour of Entertainment Tonight. So that day I went online and I booked a flight to Los Angeles. And the next day I wrote him back. I said, actually, I'm going to be in Los Angeles next month. That's perfect. So someone tells you the next time you're in, you know, a city, book your ticket. Yeah, actually, I'm going to be there in a month. So a month later, I was on the set of Entertainment Tonight with him, and he was showing me around and the studio lot and everything. And when we were there, he got a call on his cell phone and said, hey, Phil, if you don't mind, I have to go pick up a book from the news director over at KCBS. And I said, okay. And he goes, you mind coming with me? And I said, no, that's fine. So I went over to KCBS, which is 2 buildings down on the studio lot. And I kind of sat in the lobby and he goes, do you want to come in? I said, no, I'll just wait here, because I didn't want anyone from Los Angeles CBS to call anyone at Miami CBS and say, by the way, your producer Phil's out here looking for a job, which I was not doing at all. I was literally on vacation, just visiting this guy at Entertainment Tonight. So one thing led to another, and the news director actually came out to the lobby. He's like, hey, don't sit out here. Come on in, you know, let's talk. And I said, okay. So we started talking. And he was asking me what I do and where I work. And I'm like, I work in Miami. And he's like, oh, where? And I said, WFOR. And he's like, oh, our sister station. And he pulls out his cell phone and he's texting. And I said, oh, who are you texting? And I said, I said, who are you texting? And he said, I'm texting your boss, your news director. And I said, oh, she'll love that to hear that I'm out here. And he goes, oh, no, don't worry. She'll be fine. And we just started talking, the news director from Los Angeles and I, and he kind of half jokingly offered me a job and then just said, when you get back to Miami, let's talk seriously. And we started talking and went back and forth. And 2 months later, he seriously offered me the job and I ended up in Los Angeles. I came here, I started producing every show we had in Los Angeles. We're on the air. I think we're on the like 11 or 12 hours now. Back then we were on the air like 13 hours. I mean, it's like we're 2 stations. We're CBS 2 and KCAL 9. So I produce for both. I write for both. And we just go back and forth all day. We're just on the air. So I produced, you know, I think they wanted to find out what show I was a good fit for. And I also wanted to see what show I was a good fit for. And then eventually I just ended up on the 11 a.m. news, which is where I am now. I absolutely love it. I love doing the morning show. It's fantastic. Another way I was like kind of looking for opportunities, but not looking for opportunities is about 4.5 years into my job here, we lost our guest booker. And the guest booker is a position at our station that basically books all the guests for our midday shows. And that's celebrities, any celebrities that are coming through with, you know, TV projects, movie projects, books, you know, cooking demos, anyone, that's what they do. And this person who was our guest booker at the time actually got another job outside of LA, and we just had no guest booker for a few months. And I am friends with a lot of agents and managers and people just with my contacts in Miami that I made. And so one of them emailed me one day and said, hey, would you like to book, you know, so-and-so person? And I asked my boss and I said, hey, do you want me to book this person for the noon show? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, please. From that day on, I was booking every guest. And up until the pandemic hit, I was booking the guests for years. So I always say I'm not the guest booker. I just book the guests. So again, that opportunity just kind of fell into my lap. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Which is where I am now. So that's kind of my journey here. I mean, advice for you guys, you know, producers are hard to find. Good producers are even harder to find. What it takes is passion, drive, a good work ethic, a great attitude, and a little bit of luck. I mean, that's all I did. I love producing because every day is a constant education. And when you hang out with your friends, you know the most in the room because you're always up on current events. Everyone's always asking me, hey, what's the latest with coronavirus? What's the latest with the impeachment? What's the latest with the weather? All that stuff. So now that I'm kind of like inundated you with all that information, if you guys have any questions for me, just start throwing them out there. I know you guys are journalists and I expect you to have questions so I can ask them or answer them. What was your major in college? It was mass communications with an emphasis on news, and I'll explain. I, again, as I said, wanted to be an anchor reporter. Sure, I just wanted to be on the air. So I took the news course. News is basically on air. I had to take an acting class. I had to take a public speaking class. What else did I have to take? I had to take this crazy, I can't even explain what it was. We just had to act, but it was like we had to do these weird movements and like come up with these sketches. And I can't even explain what the class was, but it was wild. And I'll never forget it. It was great. If I would have known that I wanted to be producing, that I would have taken the production course. However, in college, at least when I took classes, you take all of your general education first. So those are your maths, your sciences, your English. You get all that out of the way. When you get into your major, you take, you know, intro to mass communications, you know, telecom law, you know, writing. For me, I had to, you know, just take grammar classes and writing classes. I call myself the grammar Nazi because I am such a stickler for grammar and spelling. Like that's what I spend a lot of my day on, is correcting mistakes on you know, graphics that I find, people spelling words wrong, because I have to make sure it's perfect, because producers are so type A and you have to want everything, you know, lined up, you know, cross your T's and dot your I's. So I hope that answers your question. What is your best tip to impress employers in interviews? This is just my thing. They're always going to ask you what your strengths and your weaknesses are. I always turn my weaknesses into strengths. So my best tip is, for example, have those ready, because you know they're going to ask it. So, you know, when they say, Phil, what are your 3 weaknesses? I always say something like, you know, I live and breathe TV news. I need to get a hobby, which is not true. But I say that because it makes it like, oh, wow, this kid's, you know, loves news. And I mean, which I do, I love news, but it's not my entire life. When I leave the building, it's kind of like, I'm done. So, you know, it's just, I live and breathe news. You know, I need to find a hobby because that's all I do is watch news and obsess about news all day. I also say that one of my weaknesses is that I need to delegate more, that I take on too much, because an employer is like, oh, wow, he can do a lot. But to you, that could be a weakness, but it's really like a strength. So you kind of want to take your weaknesses and turn them into strengths. Did you know anything about news broadcast or the world of professional news broadcasting before going into the industry? Nothing. I knew nothing. The only thing I knew is what we did in our morning announcements. And that's basically, you know, what clubs were meeting today and what kind of chicken nuggets they were going to have for lunch. That's all I knew. I did not know anything until, I mean, college, I kind of learned stuff, but again, that's not like real news. We were just doing college news stuff, if that makes any sense. So my day one, when my assistant news director took me to lunch on my first day, and he's like, do you know anything I mean, this is after I got the job. He said, do you know anything about producing? And I'm like, not really. He goes, I'll teach you. And again, starting off in a small market, that's what you need to do, because they will take the time, and they have the time to show you exactly what you need to do and to help you through that. Okay, hold on, wait. I'm going back and forth here. Okay, any questions? Come up with questions. Journalists, you guys are journalists. Send me questions. I want to I want to hear questions. Oh, we already did that. Okay. While you guys get more questions, I hope you get more questions because I could be here all day answering questions for you. Anything you want to know about TV news, I am here. Ask me whatever you want. I used to do a session at STN called Tips for Interviewing in a Newsroom. So I can just kind of go through some of these. Another one of my favorite tips is that when you're on an interview, and this never happened to me, but this actually happened at a station I was at, when they would hire people and they would bring them into the lobby, the secretary would be telling the person they were interviewing with what you were doing. So like if this person like picked up their phone and like, you know, they would be like, oh, now they're on their phone. Now they're doing this. Now they're reading a magazine. So always be careful of the gatekeepers. When you walk in the door to be interviewed for any job, you're on. Don't pick up your phone. Just be early. You know, I always say that, you know, 5 minutes is on time. And if you're on time, you're late. So always be early. And always be aware of the gatekeepers, the secretaries, the janitors, anyone that works in that building, from the CEO to the janitor who mops the floors. Be nice to everybody, and you never want to burn your bridges in this business at all because everyone knows everybody. And I tell you, that's why I was so freaked out when I walked into the newsroom in Los Angeles. I knew someone was going to say, reach out to someone in Miami and say, hey, you have a producer here. And that's what I was really freaking out about. And that's what I was worried about, because someone always knows someone. There was a meteorologist I worked with in Greenville, Mississippi, 19 years ago. And he was going for a job in Memphis. And I was not on his reference list. I haven't talked to him in years. But someone at that Memphis station worked with me in Greenville and called me and said, hey, did you work with this certain person? And I said, I did work with them. And they said, well, we're not going on their reference list. We're going, you know, with other people. And what do you remember about him? And I loved him. I thought he was great. I just hadn't talked to him in a long time. But you never want to burn your bridges in this business. I mean, I guess in life too, but especially in this business, because it's just so small. Everyone knows everyone in TV news, which is also cool, because when you get a new boss or you get a new employee, you can just go on Facebook and see who your mutual friends are. And, you know, say, oh, hey, I know Maggie from this place, or I know Russ from, oh my God, that's great. And that kind of gives you a bond, you know, right away. What is the toughest part of your day for the 11 a.m. show? Time. And any producer will tell you, time. You're working against the clock to get the show on. And, you know, that's, again, finding stories, talking to your reporters, writing scripts. Like, I know when I get in the morning at 6 a.m., which I love, by the way, I love being in at 6 a.m. because I'm off at 2 p.m. and I love having the rest of the day to myself. So I know at 6 a.m., I know where I have to be. 7 a.m., I know where I have to be. 8 o'clock, I know I have to write my morning promos. 9 o'clock, I know I have the morning call. 10 o'clock, I know I have to start, you know, putting the, you know, a bow on it, because at 10:30, I have to print the show. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. And then 11 o'clock, the show is on. So that's kind of the toughest part of, I think, any producer's day is time. Do you have to be comfortable on camera to be a producer? No, because you're not on camera as a producer. And you can be a producer right out of the gate, right out of college, because producers can write their ticket in this business. One of my former bosses said, go as high as you can, as fast as you can. Because again, just like I said, a good producer is hard to find. A great producer is even harder to find. How would you recommend what job works best for us? I think, again, you can check out tvjobs.com, and they have a list of, it's, when I subscribed, this is 20 years ago, it was like $20 for a year. So I don't know what it is now, but they have all the jobs listed for every station around the country that needs someone, you know, by title, by, you know, experience, you know, what kind of experience you need, location, city, state, I mean, market size, whatever you want to know. So tvjobs.com is good. But what job works best for you is a reason you need to start off super small, because if you don't know what you want to do now, that's okay. Don't be afraid to change your career focus. I changed my career focus, you know, a few months after I started my career, and, you know, I'm here now. So, you know, if you know you want to be a reporter, then be a reporter and apply for a reporter job. But don't be afraid to apply for like reporter producer, or, you know, something, you know, in that respect, because you're going to fine tune your craft and you're going to hone in on what you want to do starting your first job. And if not your first job, your second or third or fourth, and you're just going to get better each job you go on, if that makes sense. I hope that answered your question, Rodrigo. A good place to look for internships, it depends where you are. When I was in Tampa, I looked for internships on every single station's website. There was an NBC station, a Fox station, an ABC station, and a CBS station. And I went on every single website and it had information about internships. Send your resume to this person, or call this person, or do whatever. If that's how it is now, I would send a resume and I would send a box of candy, you know, or something, so that, you know, a few weeks later you can call and be like, hey, remember I sent you that candy? I just want to know, you know, if any internships are open. I think I answered that. Also, sometimes colleges have lists of internships as well. So you can go to your, you know, whatever guidance, I think guidance counselor, I don't know if that's the word, counselor for your major. Like we had an actual counselor for mass communications, and she had a whole list of internships. I just went ahead and just did it myself because I like to research and do my own, you know, I guess, research. What advice do you have to prepare yourself for the workplace and industry while in college? Internships. That's basically what you need to do, because that's a way to get your foot in the door. You can do a lot of work in college. And listen, you guys are doing amazing work in high school. Like, your work is exemplary. It's awesome. I mean, what you guys are doing now. So you have such a leg up on like even what I was doing in high school, because the technology is so much greater. But internships, and sometimes you'll have a TV station on campus. I know we did at USF. I did apply there and they never called me back, but that's fine. I wasn't bitter. I was just like, okay, they don't want me. But you know, on campus TV stations, even if it's like a PBS station and you have to run cameras for a telethon, that's great. Do it. You'll learn how to run cameras, you know, but your internships at a main TV station are really where you're going to learn so much. What exactly does the reporter do in a news station? Do they assist the producer? Okay, reporters go out in the field and they gather news elements. So they do the video, or the photographer shoots the video, and they write the scripts for the story that you see. Again, the reporter only has like a 2-minute hole in like a 30-minute newscast, which is why when I was reporting, I was like, you know what? I really love the whole newscast as a whole. And I love putting it all together. I love putting puzzles together and just putting all the pieces and where they fit in. I just love that. And I live for that. And that's why I chose producing. But reporting is, you're out in the field. And listen, when you're a reporter, you're out in the 15-degree weather. You're out in the 121-degree weather in Las Vegas. You're out in the hurricanes. When you're a producer, you're sitting back in the station in the heat, if it's cold, in the air conditioning, if it's hot, and you're just sitting there eating your lunch and, you know, watching your TV on the side and seeing what's going on and taking everything in. And they're out there like busting their butts. So that's another reason why I love producing. How would you recommend what job? I already answered that. What would you say is the best way to make connections? Stuff like this, obviously. I know people who have stayed in touch with me, and you know, I helped them get internships at various stations, you know, I was at. But networking is huge. Also, I don't know if you guys have RTNA. When I was in college, it was RTNDA. I know there are some high school chapters. I don't know if there still are. That's a good group to get involved with. It's rtna.org is what it is. But again, like a lot of times you're not going to want to do any of this until you get to college anyway, because it's just, you know, in high school you have like essentially 4 more years. So you kind of, you know, technology could change, you know, management could change, personnel could change at TV stations. So if you meet someone today in your senior year of high school at a TV station, they may not be around in 4 years. So wait till you get to college and then go get those internships and then go network and offer seriously to sweep the floors and be the best floor sweeper at that TV station, because you're going to learn so much. They're going to be like, oh, wait, Phil, you do a great job at sweeping the floor. Why don't you come over here and I'll show you how I edit, show you how I put together a story. So again, they're going to love you, whenever you get your internships. Do you ever get overwhelmed by your work pile, having to get things done ASAP? It's funny. I actually used to get very overwhelmed, because at some times when there's breaking news happening and you have 50 things going on at one time and you're trying to talk to the weather person and trying to text your reporter out in the field, and there's just so much going on. Um, I don't remember at what point in my career in Los Angeles. I was never overwhelmed in any other station. Los Angeles is the first place I was like, oh my God, I'm doing so much. But then I sat back and I was like, you know what? There has not been one day that I've worked in Los Angeles that I've never gotten my work done. So if I ever feel overwhelmed, I just sit back and I take a breath and I do one thing at a time, because that's all I can do. I can't do, I have to focus on one thing at a time. You have 10 things going on around you, but in my mind, I can put them in order. And I'm like, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. But yeah, I get overwhelmed, of course. Just have to sit back and it's all going to get done, because there's never been a day where I've not gotten anything done. What types of things do stations look for in resumes and applications? They look for work experience. So again, on your resume, the first thing on your resume is not going to be an objective. Do not put at the top of your resume, objective, to find a job that utilizes my skills in TV news and editing and writing. No, that goes in your cover letter. The first thing in your resume should be your work experience. What station were you last at? What station were you last at before? If you're in college going to your first job, it's going to be, I had to do a thesis. So I actually found this small channel in Tampa called the Education Channel. And I started producing public service announcements for them as part of my thesis. So they got great public service announcements for their air, which they were airing for like 10 years after I left, I promise you. They were good. And I was getting real life experience. So that was right at the top of my resume. Education Channel, produced public service announcements, did this. Internship, WFLA in Tampa, did this. WSF TV on campus, did this. So that's what they want to see first, is your work experience, what you can do for them. Do you wish to work at a different news station in the future? No, I'm happy right now where I am. I really am. So the answer is no, because LA is market 2, as I told you. So the only place for me to go really is New York. And I have no interest in living in New York right now. So I'm really happy in Los Angeles. So no, I'm fine where I am. Have you ever worked on the Late Late Show? Does all this advice? I have not worked on the Late Late Show. Actually, one of our good friends works on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, I want to say. And this doesn't really apply to late night shows, only because that's more entertainment-y, I think. And so you have to be a good writer. Obviously he writes a lot of jokes for them. So that's kind of that thing. I mean, what I'm talking about is basically just TV news. I guess if you are in, like I'm in Los Angeles and I met someone who worked, who was an executive at Jimmy Kimmel. And I was like, hey, I've always wanted to, see what you guys do over there. And he's like, yeah, sure. Come over and let me show you what we do. I think that would be great. And he'd be like, hey, do you want to, work for us and write or do something? I mean, it could happen that way, but you really have to kind of be, far along in your career. You can't come out of college and be like, I'm going to go work for the Tonight Show. That doesn't really happen. What didn't I answer over here? People in the industry open. Oh, are people in the industry open to being shadowed or talking with high school students that are interested in the field? Yes, because I do it. Or I should say I used to before COVID. I would have what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. There it is. It's pberman@cbs.com. And I would have students like you guys come in groups, and Southern California schools would, teachers would call me up, be like, hey, Phil, remember I met you at STN last year? Can we get that tour? I'd be like, oh my God, of course. So they would come for a tour. They'd sit through a newscast. Certain students who were really, really, big on producing and really, really wanted to know what I did from day to day would come and sit with me, I would check with my boss. I'd be like, hey, I have a, high school student who wants to sit with me today. Is that okay? They'd be like, yeah, sure. And so they would just sit with me and just kind of see what I did and how I lined everything up and how I edit video and how I do the scripts and how I print everything and how it all comes together. So yeah, 100%. I did it up until last March when we couldn't have guests anymore. So I don't know when that's going to happen again, because I can't even, have like, friends, close friends come to the station. Like a lot of people right now are working from home in the pandemic. I was producing from my living room for 7.5 months before I went back in November of last year to the building. And right now there's like no one there. It's like a ghost town, because they're trying to limit obviously how many people need to be in the building, which is understandable. And that's great that they're, worried about our safety. Yes, they are so open to having you shadow them, but not right now. I don't think anyone is going to want to shadow right now, especially with what's going on. So give it a couple months, wait till people are vaccinated, and then start reaching out. And I'm sure they would do that. Yes. And I will give you my email again. It's P Berman. It's my first initial last name at cbs.com. And what I will also do for you is I will put it as my name in the chat feature as you guys think of more questions. How's that? There you go. There, you can email me. Okay, what other question? Do we have any other questions? I know we're kind of getting to the end of the session. Let me see if I have anything else here. Okay, so when you apply for a job at a TV station, another great interviewing tip is do your homework. Watch all of the station's newscasts. So if you're going for a job at, ABC 7, well, make sure you DVR or watch their morning show, their midday show, their 5 o'clock newscast, their 11 o'clock newscast, because every single newscast a station does has a different feel. The morning show is obviously going to be a little lighter because people are waking up. They want some good news to start their day, and they want their traffic and their weather and what's it going to be today. So do your homework. I mentioned all of this. Prepare your answers ahead of time. I already told you all about this. Remember those strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, you can't have just one skill be marketable. I talked about this. This is why your first job, you learn so much. Your internship, you learn so much. Take it all in, absorb it all in. God, I helped and when I did my internship, I learned how to report. I was out in the field with reporters doing live shots. I would hang out with the anchors. One day I hung out with the anchors. I was doing, the main anchor wanted me to balance her checkbook. I was doing her checkbook for her one day. I was just doing everything. They just had me do everything because, again, you're free labor. They don't have to pay you. So you're like, hey, do you want me to, run cameras tonight? Okay, sure. I mean, they'll let you do whatever. Just, they don't have to pay you. It's great. Okay, I love this tip. So if you're at a restaurant during an interview, and this may not happen to everyone, but if they take you for lunch or dinner, watch what you order. Because I went to an Italian restaurant one time and everyone else got spaghetti with pasta sauce. That was not what I was going to do because I don't want to get pasta sauce all over my suit. So I got like a Caesar salad with dressing on the side because I didn't want to make a mess. So watch what you order if you go into a restaurant. I know you wouldn't think about that, but it makes sense. Watch what you order at restaurants. Yeah, pay attention. Don't ask too much or don't say too much or too little, but feel free to ask questions. What's the best part about the station? What's the best place to live around here? As much as you want to work for them, they should want you to work there just as much. So ask them questions as well. What would be the best way to keep up with sudden changes in the field, such as pandemics? That's kind of a broad question. Right now, what's the best way to keep up with it? Obviously, everyone in the field has to wear masks. All the microphones are on like these long poles. So they kind of hold the microphone up so the interviewee doesn't have to be right next to the reporter. What else are we doing? Obviously we're working from home, so you kind of have to be okay working from home. I love working from home, but you know what? I like being in the building as well because I actually am there. There's an energy that's in a newsroom that you can't find anywhere else that I really like to feel that energy of just what's going on, just hearing the scanners, pop off, and with all the, pursuits going on, or there's a fire downtown, or, someone got shot here. There's just an energy in the newsroom that you can't get when you're sitting at home. So I think with the pandemic, you just have to kind of be really flexible, because it was like they took ping pong balls and threw them all up in the air, and it's like, okay, everyone's just going to go all over the place. Like, I'm producing essentially 2 shows now. I'm producing the 11 a.m. newscast for CBS 2, and I'm producing a noon newscast for KCAL 9 in Los Angeles. I'm doing both. Normally it would only be one job, but I'm doing 2 because everyone's just kind of doubling up right now. We lost some people during the pandemic. They got other jobs, and they were not obviously replacing those. And a lot of stations aren't really hiring right now during the pandemic. So you just kind of have to weather the storm, until this is all over, and it will be over. I promise you it will all be over, and things are going to get back to normal soon. And I will be able to be back at STN speaking in person in front of you. But for now, this is kind of what we have to deal with. We have no choice, until this is all done. I hope that answered your question. Jackie, how are we on time? Are we good?
We're good on time.
I'm just talking and talking and talking.
We're about ready to wrap it up. So if anybody has any final questions.
Yes, no, maybe so. You guys have my email. It's on my thing. It's pberman@cbs.com. Feel free to email me anytime. I still have students I talked to years ago that email me asking me advice for something, or sending me a story that they did. Hey, can you watch this? Can you give me advice on, what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing right? Yeah, and put your subject in all caps, because I get 700 emails a day, because when you work in a newsroom, everyone's emailing the newsroom, and you're on this group, list. So, put, hey, Phil, question from STN, and I'll see that it's you in all caps. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for spending, a few minutes with me. And I hope that I made a lot of sense and inspired some of you. And again, I know my story is unique, and it's not what everyone's story is going to be. But again, if you have a passion to do this, and a drive, a good work ethic, and a great attitude, you're going to go so far in this business. And keep in touch with me and tell me all about it. And hopefully I'll see you next year in person.